Like the title of the video says, we're going to be jumping into Support Ash, also known as Sash, today. So the first thing that I want to give you guys is sort of a primer to this guide. In my previous Cheryl video, I went over a lot of general support stuff. This includes like how shimps are calculated, how amulets work, all sorts of general support information. I'm not going to repeat that here because it's going to add like 10 minutes to this video. I'm going to include a link to that video. Please jump to the timestamp called, like, I think it's called general support information. Jump to that if you want to see all of that information. But for this guide, we're going to focus specifically on Sash because we actually have a lot of topics to cover. In addition, I'm going to primer the guide with the direction that it's going. We're going to start with my opinions in this video, and that's mainly because a lot of people have conflicting ideas on how Sash is and how good he is and stuff, so I'm actually going to open up with my opinions. Then we're going to talk about his abilities, and then we're going to talk about perks and builds and stuff like that. Scattered all throughout the video, we're going to be talking about weapons and weapon choices, because on Support Ash, it actually matters a lot, not only what weapons you pick, but what weapons your team picks. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So my opinions on Support Ash are that he is probably the best pre-made group healer in the game. Now, for solo queue, he's not going to be very good, and there's a couple reasons for this. Support Ash, first of all, is the hardest support to play. Very clearly the hardest support to play. Not only that, but he is the hardest character, in my opinion, to play in the whole game. He is a support, which means he's going to be focused. He has a lot going on with his kit. You need to know when to go into melee range. You need to know when to go into full range and be marking targets. You need to be watching fear levels because you can manage that very effectively with your Q ability. And just in general, you're going to have a lot going on. You're going to need to manage your ammo very carefully. You're going to need to, in more advanced builds, even do some weapon dropping, weapon swapping, stuff like that. So that's my opinion. I think he is the best healer if your team is working together, if your team knows how your kit works. Also, if you're good, because if you're not performing, you're not going to do well on this character. Cheryl is much easier to perform on. Pablo is much more defensible because he's not going to get seen and targeted as much. Support Ash has the highest top-end capability, but also he is the hardest to play. So just keep that in mind. But let's go ahead and jump into, and I'll explain a lot of these things. So jumping into his kit. So first of all, we have Reassuring Presence. Now, this is your Q ability. Everybody knows what this is. You basically wave your hands around for about 2 to 3 seconds, and you lower fear around you. This has about a 5-meter range. It's really, really good at fear reduction, though. 50 fear is half the bar. This is a huge burst, and it's on a 1-minute cooldown, which is not very long. This means you're going to be able to manage your team's fear very effectively. You can counter your hunter or warrior getting hit by a tree better than anyone else. And it requires no resources. So for instance, Cheryl's fear reduction requires shimps. So fear reduction is really good on demand to make sure you don't get noticed early, or make sure your hunter who just hit a tree trap or a portal or something doesn't go over that possession line. It's really, really good. Some things to note. Some people, I've seen it, and these are generally newer players, so, you know, this is how the guides work. I just give all the information. You are not invulnerable when you use this. You are generally unCCable. There are things that can knock you out of it. Possession is one of them, so if he happens to possess you at just the right time, or hit you with a demon dash at just the right time, hit you with a tree at just the right time, it is going to CC you out of it. But other than that, like normal attacks and stuff don't push you around, and you will continue to do it. However, be very careful when you do this, because you will be just taking damage to the face. This is by far his probably simplest and easiest to use ability. But it is something that you're constantly going to have to make sure you're in the right AoE, and you're watching those fear bars. Next up, we have probably the greatest and most misunderstood ability that he has, which is alternative healing. Let's cover the basics. Heavy attacks restore 25 health and an AoE around you. This is not a percentage, this is a flat amount. the area, the radius of this thing is not probably what you think. You might be thinking, hey, it's probably going to be 5 meters because that is his Shimp's range and his amulet range. That's not true. But it's also not Cheryl's, which is 10 meters. It's 8 meters. For whatever reason, they made this thing an 8-meter radius, which is a lot nicer than 5 meters, though. It's a big increase, but it does only heal 25 per swing. This means you're going to be wanting to use a fast weapon. Now, everyone, literally everyone I've ever encountered has said hunting knife, that's the best weapon for him. I actually sort of disagree, and this is a little bit more of an advanced tactic. But what does the hunting knife give you before I get into why I disagree with it as the best weapon? The hunting knife gives you a 5-speed attack speed, which is about 167% attack speed for those of you that are curious. So you're going to be attacking pretty fast, multiple times per second almost. So it's good. It really is good. And with heavy attacks, you're almost attacking once every second. This actually can add up to a lot of healing over time, but there are definitely situations where you're not going to want to be in melee range. Do not heavy attack possessed units that are focusing you. Do not do it. The only time you should ever do that is if you're in a situation where you've been puked on by like a warlord and you literally can't run away. Then it's acceptable. No other situation should you be heavy attacking a possessed unit in your face. With that out of the way, I think the best weapon is probably something that has high balance bar damage, like a sledgehammer or a shovel. Even bats, axes, swords, and stuff are good too. Now, I know what you might be thinking, and that is that has a really slow attack speed, and you're completely correct. And some of you are already ahead of me on this. Drop your weapon. Whenever you need to do healing, which is not going to be all the time, open up your menu, drop your melee weapon. This is good practice for when you're going to want to play Hunter. You're going to need to be able to drop your weapon quickly. So whenever you decide internally, hey, I can go in and start swinging, use your fists. They have the exact same attack speed as the hunting knife, and they have half the damage. That means you do not kill things quickly. That also means that if you are just sustaining and you've got an unpossessed in your face, you can just swing away at them. You can balance bar them pretty easily, even with fists, and you're going to be able to keep that target alive for longer. But not only that, when you need to, you're going to have access to a sledgehammer or a shovel to make sure you're in F spam, you're in finisher spam during the moments where you're getting focused. Because if you're using a hunting knife, you're not going to be able to balance bar things extremely quickly or reliably. You want a weapon that can do that because you still are the support. You can still be focused. So those are some notes about alternative healing. It's a very complicated skill. It looks simple, but there's a lot of layers and a lot of decisions you have to make constantly on the battlefield with support Ash. So keep those in mind. I'm going to be grouping the next two abilities together. These are by far the most complicated thing about support Ash. Marking. So what does marking do? Whenever support Ash gets a headshot, a little green sparkler will appear on their head. Now, this is the reason why in solo queue, support Ash isn't great. You need to have some information on your team, but not only that, you need to have communication. You need to say, hey, there's a basic behind you that I marked. Turn around and hit it. That'll give healing. Hey, I'm gonna, and this is something that they'll just know when you play with somebody long enough. It's like, hey, the possessed unit is on you. I'm gonna just mark them in the head over and over. There is 0 cooldown for this ability for the damage component and the healing component. So what does it do though? So whenever you land a headshot, you will mark it. They'll get the green sparkler on their face. They will take 30% damage from the next attack against them. This is, it says shot in the description, but it is all damage. It is melee damage. It is the running kick damage, where you do the running heavy attack. It is everything. So everything consumes this mark. You need to be careful about what you're doing, and this is where I'm talking about communication. If you come up and you do the heavy kick and it does like 10 damage, you're doing 13 damage. Congratulations. If you ran up, you paused for a second, and then you did a heavy attack, you just went from doing 300 damage to 400 damage with that heavy attack, right? Optimizations like this are super important on support Ash. The difference between your hunter getting a headshot or a body shot can mean the difference between one-shotting a possessed unit and not with this mark. It's a huge damage multiplier, and it is multiplicative with all the other stuff in the game. So 30% damage is huge, but not only that, you get 30% of the damage that you do back as HP. This is multiplicative. This means that if you were doing 100 damage with a shot and they're marked, at least at level 25, you got all your perks, they will take 130 damage. You are not healing for 30 health. You're healing for more like 39 health. This actually elevates your healing even more. So you can actually read this 30% healing if you translate it to like their base damage. It's really more like 39% of their base damage if you weren't there. So you're almost healing for 40% of their normal damage on every shot. I hope that makes sense. Now, let's move on a little bit because I think you guys probably understand just, hey, I marked it and I hit it, right? Cool. Let's talk about weapon selection and how to maximize this healing. I've done multiple games where I've done mark only healing, and I can usually pull off about 6 to 7k. Sometimes it can get super hectic, and some games I've had to invalidate because I've had to use shimps on people that get hit a lot and stuff like that. But in general, you can probably pull off 6 to 7k just with mark healing. Now granted, if the demon is super powerful, please don't try that. You're going to get your team killed. You need to pop shimps when you need to pop shimps. But it is one of those things that is extremely powerful. And let's talk about some numbers, right? So if you use a shotgun, shotguns actually have multiple pellets, right? You guys know this. And it seems from my testing that you have 6 pellets. That means if I have a shotgun and let's say it's a legendary boomstick to make it a little bit simpler, and it does 666 damage. That means at base, every one of those pellets is doing 111, right? That makes sense. But each one of those pellets will try to consume the mark. That means if your hunter is using a legendary boomstick, they're only going to be healing from one of the 6 pellets. So just make sure you know that if you have hunters, they need to be trying to find single pellet guns. Now, that does not mean they leave a legendary boomstick on the ground, just for reference. It's still going to be decent healing even without all that. But just to give you guys an idea, let's say you have a basic hunting rifle. It does, I think, 235 damage. You get the hunter bonus of 150% of that. So you basically say 235 times 1.5. Headshot bonus is 80%, so you multiply that by 1.8. That ends up with like 630 damage. You add on top of that the fact that you marked the target, so they take 30% more damage. And now you're doing 820-ish damage. And take 30% of that, and that's your healing. So in a single shot, you were healing for 250 damage, or 250 health. That is a lot, and that is not factoring in if the hunter has perks that are increasing their healing, or not their healing, their damage, which also increases the healing in this capacity, but you can easily get hunters putting up over 2,000 damage, especially with the mark. So what does that transfer into healing? Well, that's about 600 healing. And what did you use to get that? The support used a single bullet, and then the hunter used a single bullet. So 2 ammo worth 600 healing is insane. This is going to save you a lot of shimps, and it's also really good for warriors. So warriors in general should be spamming heavy attacks. Heavy attacks are higher DPS with the slower weapons like swords and axes and stuff. They should be using heavy attacks. So if you have a basic sword, let's say it's like 80 damage, you put in the warrior bonus of the 50%. Heavy attacks are times 2 damage. You're going to end up with like 240 damage. Add in the mark, you're over 300 damage, and then you take 30% of that healing, and you're healing for almost 100 health every heavy attack. Now, 100 is obviously not as much as the hunter's going to get, and you're going to have to keep applying it. But think about it this way. If you're getting hit for like 150 damage from a possessed basic, and you're swinging back against him with a white weapon, you're almost trading hit for hit every single time. and you'll probably kill him in 4 or 5 hits. So that's like 4 or 5 bullets that you have to waste to basically take a Shimp's, having to use a Shimp's. So 4 or 5 bullets is definitely worth a Shimp's. It's huge healing. And keep in mind, guys, these numbers are not including pink F bonuses. These numbers are not including your perk tree bonuses if you're taking Devastating Force or Wig Splitter or any of the other nodes that you can take. So this is literally the bare ass minimum you're going to be healing if you can hit your headshots. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about specifically for support Ash is your weapon selection for ranged. So you have 2 options in my opinion, not specifically, but of their type. You either want a white common pistol. White common pistol gives you easy access to ammo because you get more handgun ammo, and you're very unlikely to kill a target with your first shot. This is super important. I don't think you should build range damage on support Ash in general, just to make sure you're not one-shotting enemies to the head, because you want to mark them so your allies can hit them and consume that to get all the healing. This is super useful after the demon has spent all their energy and there's a couple commons laying around. You can just kind of pop them in the head and then your hunter can boom heal for 600, right? So just keep in mind for yourself, you want a weapon that you can not one-shot the enemy with. The other weapon type that you can use is the shotgun. Now, the reason you take a shotgun over a pistol, in my opinion, is in solo queue. In solo queue, you're going to be a lot more vulnerable. Your team's not going to defend you as much. That's just a fact. And the shotgun is going to allow you to heal yourself way more reliably. Why is that? Well, for the same reason why shotguns are not good on your teammates with a support Ash, they are good for you. After your first pellet applies the mark, all of your other pellets with a shotgun will not only consume the mark, but apply their own marks. That means instead of on a pistol or a revolver or something where your first shot will apply a mark and then your second shot will consume it, now if you get a headshot it will reapply it, but you have to use 2 shots to get any healing. On a shotgun, you'll get healing on 5 of those 6 pellets on every shot, period. As long as you're hitting in the head. This makes it to where if you have, and I did this test, with a purple boomstick, I could full heal myself from 10% HP all the way to max with 2 shots. Now that's a purple boomstick that you're taking away from the hunter, and I completely understand that that's not optimal. However, you're going to be able to heal yourself even with a white or a blue or something with a shotgun extremely fast. So I would personally say for yourself, if you're in solo queue, use a shotgun. If you're in a team queue, use a white pistol. Now for your allies, they want to be using single pellet weapons because they, the extra pellets won't get that healing if they're using a shotgun. This includes revolvers, crossbows, blunderbusses, hunting rifles, stuff like that. So there's a lot of weapon choices that have to be made when you have a support Ash on the team. This also makes it harder to get value out of him, and I completely understand that. But that's all of the ways that you kind of want to be planning around his kit. Next up, let's talk about perks, and I'm just going to go over first what I would consider his core, and then we're going to talk about what I kind of think his build should be, because there's not a lot of variation in my mind for support Ash. So the very first thing is I think Shimp's Plus is super good on everybody, but especially the people like that aren't Cheryl that don't get contact healing. It really helps putting in Shimp's and making them burstier healing. For reference, and I'm not going to go into all the mechanics, but this is about an extra 100 healing on Shimp's. Next up, 1 point in Artful Dodger. This is true of absolutely every character in the game. This takes you from having 2 dodges to 3 dodges. This is always going to be core. Down here, we take this point right here to get first aid. We grab Deeper Pockets on Shimp's, and then we get 1 point in Packing Pop. Now, we want to get into Industrial Strength. On a lot of characters, I think Industrial Strength is a waste. The main reason for that is the majority of your health is going to be coming from the support healing you. So warriors that have like 1800 health or something, it doesn't actually matter that they have that much health if they aren't drinking the Shimp's. The Shimp's is only a % heal on yourself. This means industrial strength is actually really good on supports because you're going to be drinking the shimps most of the time. Also, it helps for not being burst down. So from here, I come down here and I grab Deep Pocket Amulets, and then I'm going to come into Industrial Strength. Now, the reason I don't put 4 points in here is because the 4th point is currently bugged. Someone in the last video notified me of this. I actually already knew it. I just forgot to mention it, and I should have. So the 4th point literally is bad for you. It takes you from having 4 points to 0 points. It is bugged, and it is still bugged as of the making of this video. Please test it for yourself if you're watching this from the future. It may be fixed by then. So 3 points into Industrial Strength right now. From there, I think this is basically going to be your core. Now you kind of need to decide where you go. Personally, I really like coming over here into Tougher Than Hell. This is going to leave you with 5 points. Now you're going to be able to do a lot of stuff with that 5 points. I also personally like going into Fast Forward. Now, there is one caveat that I would say from making this like my best build, right? There's one thing. So this in general is the build that I personally run with. This is my build. From here, you can actually go into Seeing Stars. Seeing Stars is actually a pretty good option if you are not running the hunting knife weapon. If you're running a sledgehammer and you're doing the drop your weapon strategy and using fists, Seeing Stars is really, really good. It's going to make it to where you more consistently can get into finishers and protect yourself. Now, personally, I still use a sledgehammer and I still do the drop your weapon strat, and I find it fine, but there are times where one hit isn't going to be enough, and that can make you take damage. So if you're not comfortable with a single hit on a sledgehammer or something, you're not comfortable with positioning, or you feel like you're getting targeted a lot more, try to take some points out of something and put them into Seeing Stars. Now, the easiest thing to take out in my mind is going to be Industrial Strength. That's going to be the easiest thing to take out. Now, you can also take points out of Deep Pocket Amulets if you don't care about amulets as much, because obviously amulets aren't quite as good as shimps. But personally, I don't like doing that. So I think that's going to cover it for the perks and the builds section of this. This is how I generally run him. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns on the video, if you think I got anything wrong, please let me know in the comment section below. I'm still learning too. Thanks for watching.